Hello and welcome to Into the Woods with Holly Worton. This podcast is all about our journey into the woods of ourselves, getting to know who we are, and where we're going in life so that we can create the life that we want to live. It's about deepening your connection with yourself, taking inspired action, and really trusting yourself and your intuition. It's also about mindset. Our beliefs are such an important part of this journey. And there are so many ways for us to change our mindset so that we can more easily live a life of expansive joy. This podcast is also about going literally into the woods and spending time in nature, and how that can help us on our own personal journey of self-knowledge. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now let's get into this week's episode. Hello, adventurers, and welcome to the Into the Woods podcast, episode 500. This is your host, Holly Worton, and I'm back with another solo episode. Today, I'm going to be reflecting on the last 9.5 years of this podcast, which I began in August of 2013. I cannot believe it's been that long. And then I've got some news for you. So let's get in. So this podcast started out, it's been rebranded so many times over the years, and I've actually rebranded it more than I thought I had. So it started out as the Socially Holistic Podcast, because that's what my business was called at the time. I was helping holistic business owners with social media and their online presence. And I couldn't find a business podcast that only interviewed women. So I started my own podcast in August of 2013. A lot of podcasts way back then were very male-focused, hosted by men, interviewing men, and I just wanted something different. I wanted a show that just focused on women. And of course, that changed over the years because in recent years, I've had male guests. But we launched the podcast in August of 2013 with episode 1 of the Socially Holistic Podcast, with an episode called How to Make a Difference with Your Copywriting, with my online friend, Tanya Gardner. Now, the vast majority of my first guests were online friends. They were people that I'd met in online networking, and I really liked what they did, and I liked them, and I knew it was easy to have a conversation with them. So I started from there. And then I just kind of gradually branched out into newer people that I didn't know, and I branched out into inviting people to be a guest on the show that I had not really previously had too much interaction with. So that was exciting because I got to showcase a lot of my friends. I got to get to know them and their business better. I got to meet new people, which has always been such a great part of this podcast. And it's something that I've always really enjoyed. Then I rebranded my business and I started calling this the Ready to Bloom podcast because that's what my business was called. I totally forgot about this rebrand. I only noticed it because I was scrolling through my 500 episodes or 499 before this episodes of the podcast, and I saw that some of the episodes started out with R2B. Completely forgot about this. Then it shifted into the Business Mindset podcast because, again, I shifted the focus of my business from social media to business mindset coaching and started talking about similar things, but online business, other types of businesses, but more from the personal growth through business and how to shift your mindset in order to be more successful with business, because I love talking about personal growth and mindset. And then finally, I shifted into the Into the Woods podcast. And here the podcast for the first time aligned more with my hobbies and my books and my writing and my blog than my business, which was mainly focused on publishing by this point. My business has always been focused on publishing since 2012. So a lot of times I was kind of running two businesses. Like I had my publishing business where I help authors independently publish their books. And then I was also helping people with social media and other things. So yeah, it's been a mix. I've done so many things over the years. And let's not even get into what I was doing before I moved to the UK. Totally different things. So this podcast has been a reflection of my journey and all of my pivots since 2013. I have shifted and changed and adjusted my course so many times in the last 10 years. But the consistent theme of this show has always been personal growth and reflection on where we are, who we are, and where we want to be. And I've blogged a lot about something that I call the 3 questions, and I will link to those posts in the show notes. That's something I've been blogging about since 2011, before this podcast even started. I did this talk at a conference about what I call the three happiness questions or the three questions. And those questions are who am I, and where am I going? And those are based on my previous spiritual path, where my spiritual teacher would always say these are three questions that you need to have in mind always. So, like I said, this podcast has always been about personal growth and reflection, sometimes personal growth through business, and then personal growth through outdoor adventures, but always involving mindset shifts. Because back in 2013, right before I started this podcast in July of 2013, I trained in PSYCH-K, which, as you've heard me mention 1,000 times on this podcast, is the technique that I use to create mindset shifts and to change my beliefs at the subconscious level. And over the years, I've also worked with other people. So definitely, PSYCH-K has been a big part of this because ever since I trained in PSYCH-K, I've always been kind of aware of my mindset. What are my beliefs? What are my blocks? What's holding me back? What do I need to believe instead to achieve my goals and do the things that I want to do, whether that's in business or whether that's through outdoor adventures? Now, the show has also changed in format over the years. Started out with just interviews, and then eventually I added solo episodes, which was a huge leap for me. I really hesitated to do that in the beginning because it's really easy for me to have a conversation with someone, but it's not always easy for me. Well, I think I didn't believe that I had enough to say for a half an hour or sometimes more. Yeah, so that was a big leap for me. And then I went into kind of a mix of solo episodes and interviews, and I wasn't always regular with that. I think I always kind of had the idea that I would do 2 interviews a month and 2 solo episodes, but sometimes it was hard to get guests, and so I was doing more solo episodes, and then sometimes I had no idea what I wanted to talk about, so I was doing more interviews. So it's always been just kind of a random mix. It's never been that 2 and 2 format that I really wanted. Now, occasionally over the years, I had regular co-hosts who you may remember from previous episodes. Joe Casey and I have had so many fantastic episodes over the years, especially about business and also about personal growth. Joanna Hennon, also a good friend of mine. We've done tons of episodes together. And Cara Wild has also been a frequent guest on this show, and she also has her own podcast. So I'll link to all of these people. I actually have blog posts on my website with links to all of the episodes that I've done with all of these 3 people. So there have been people who have been kind of accompanying me in these episodes for many, many years and almost throughout the beginning, which has been great to kind of have people to co-create with. And I've really, really enjoyed that. So it's been a rough few months for me. 2022, I mean, obviously before that we had COVID, which was a total upheaval for all of us. And then my business just went through this huge, in 2022. I eventually got a job in October of last year. Then I left and then I started doing freelancing work for them. And now that's starting to change a little bit how I'm working with them. Things are changing in my life professionally, but I don't know how. I feel like I'm about to reach a kind of before and after point in my life, but I don't know what the after part looks like yet. I am in the messy middle, and I've done a podcast episode on that way back, episode 198. Joe Casey and I were talking about how to handle the messy middle in business. And that's just basically that in-between part where things are changing. You don't know necessarily what you want or what that's going to look like. You don't know how it's changing. I don't know. I'm in that place right now. Like, I don't know what's going on, but something is coming. What this means is that I'm pausing the podcast for now. And this was a really difficult decision to come to, but once I arrived at that decision, I knew it was the right decision for me. I may come back to it in the future. I have a feeling I will, but all I know right now is that it's right for me to be pausing the podcast right now. And it seemed appropriate to do that at episode 500. And there was a part of me that was thinking, 500, that's a nice round number. But then wouldn't it be nice to keep going for another 6 months until August and then do it for 10 years? So I was kind of debating about that, but then really it just felt like now was the time. So like I said, I'm not quitting the podcast. I'm pausing the podcast. I hope you will stay in touch with me so that you know what I'm doing next and what if I rekindle the podcast. What I will do is you can stay subscribed to the podcast if you like. Obviously, you won't be getting updates. But what I would do is I will create a form on my website where you can get in touch. You can subscribe, and I won't add you to my newsletter list. I will only add you to a list that will tell you if I'm rekindling the podcast or if I do something instead of the podcast. It will just be a single email. So I will link to that in the show notes, but basically that will be hollywharton.com, new podcast. And you can go there, sign up. And like I said, you won't be subscribed to a regular newsletter. It will just be one email saying, I'm back, I'm coming back, or something else. But there you go. Because I would like to not lose you. I really, really appreciate all of the fantastic listeners that I've had over the years. I really appreciate all the emails that you've sent me to give me feedback. It's so weird podcasting because it's like, I know, X amount of people download each episode, but it's kind of like I'm speaking and they're going out there, but I don't always know who's listening. I mean, I mostly don't know who's listening, but every once in a while, someone will comment to me on a podcast episode, and I kind of go, oh, I didn't know you listened to the podcast. So that's always pleasantly surprising. But I feel like, I don't know, I have this kind of invisible audience, or that you're invisible to me, but I feel like I don't know, I feel a relationship, even though I don't know who most of you are. So I don't know. It's a big thing to be pausing this podcast right now, but thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for listening for however long you've been listening, whether it's years throughout all these changes or whether you're just new. Thank you. So what I do know is that I will definitely be rekindling my writing. Now, I haven't published a book since 2021, and that's weird for me because I've published a lot of books. Last year was the first year since I started writing that I didn't publish a single book. I don't like that. It doesn't feel good, but I felt that my creative well was just drained and done and gone. And I did not have the time or energy to write anything last year. And I've got a lot of ideas. So people have been asking me for a second, kind of not a sequel to If Trees Could Talk, but something more about trees. And people have been asking me for a book on how to talk to trees. And I have a blog post about that. And I have an online course about that. And I will link to those in the show notes. But it's time for a book. And I've been working on the book for at least a year. No, more than that. I've been channeling messages from the trees, but I haven't done anything with them. And I have a structure, and I just need to have the time and energy to focus on that. So that's what is next for me. I also have a book that I wrote ages ago called Secrets of Plant Spirit Healing with Mugwort. And I think I might be doing a Secret of Tree Spirits Healing book. But that requires research. It requires me to kind of reconnect with a lot of tree spirits. So we shall see. I think that's something that might tie in really well with my tree work, which seems to be what a lot of people want to hear about. So if you have any other things you want me to write about, please feel free to get in touch. But that's the plan for now. I might rekindle my YouTube channel. I've been really feeling called to create videos, outdoor videos, for some time. But I'm still feeling a little bit burnt out from everything that happened last year. The last few months have been really, really stressful. So I'm kind of recovering from burnout right now. And again, I'm not sure where I'm going from here, but it might be YouTube. I've got some videos up there, but not much. And I really feel like it might be time for a refresh. We'll see. But like I said, please get in touch if you have any thoughts or ideas. I would love to hear from you. What should I do next? What would you like to see from me? I would love to know because, like I said, I'm in the messy middle, so all suggestions are welcome. I'd also like to thank everyone who has ever helped me with this podcast. I would like to thank all of my fantastic guests over the last 9.5 years. It's been really, really great talking to people that I know, getting to know new people. I love interviewing people. This is a skill that I didn't have when I started the podcast. But I'm a certified coach, and coaching is all about asking questions and kind of getting to know people and helping people get clarity on the situation. So I think my coaching training really, really helped me to become a better interviewer. I'm not going to say I'm a great interviewer, but I really feel like it's a skill that I've improved at over the last 9.5 years. I'm kind of curious to go back and listen to my very first episode, but also probably would be horrified by it, so I'm not sure. Mostly, I would like to thank Jester, my fantastic podcast editor who's been with me since the beginning. I found him online, agreed to work with him before I even recorded episode 1. And I would never have made it this far without his help. If I had had to edit my own audio and set up the show notes pages and like do all this stuff that has to be done in a podcast, I wouldn't have made it this far. Like literally all I do is I find my guests, I record the interviews, I record my solo episodes. I will write the show notes, but I send it to him and he does everything else. He is absolutely fantastic. So if you or anyone else you know ever needs a podcast editor, please get in touch and I will send you his details. He's been absolutely fantastic. So thank you, thank you, thank you. It has been a pleasure working with you. So it's goodbye for now, but you can still find me online. I'm on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. I have Facebook groups as well. I have a Facebook group on writing, which is not super active, but I have a Facebook group on trees, which is more active. I will include all of my links in the show notes so you can check them out and see what you think. Yeah, and thank you so much for listening. Happy trails to you. Thanks so much for listening to Into the Woods with Holly Worton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed, at hollyworton.com. That's HOLLYWORTON.com. If you'd like to connect with other listeners and get support on your journey, I would love for you to join my private community on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Holly Worton. That's patreon.com/Holly Worton. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next week.